Frozen cries in the pines. Hey guys, today we begin with a sound most people never hear unless the forest wants them to. A brittle cry, thinner than a wind chime, sharper than ice. It's early February in Idaho's Bitterroot Mountains. Up here, the air is knife cold, and everything speaks in silence. Trees creak like old bones. Snow crunches under your boots like sugar over stone. Even the birds have quieted. Everything waits. You probably wouldn't survive 5 minutes out here. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And in the comments, tell me, where are you watching from? And what time is it right now? Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. Elijah Barrett, 42, moves through the woods like he's part of them. Broad shoulders in a navy parka, heavy beard iced at the edges, snowshoes strapping him to the crusted trail. He's been tracking elk since dawn, his camera gear bouncing lightly at his back. Wildlife photography pays the bills, or it used to, but these days, Elijah's more interested in peace than portfolio. The woods have always been sanctuary, but something today feels off. It starts with the trees. The hush is too heavy, like the forest is holding its breath. Then comes the sound, a mewling cry, so soft it almost disappears into wind. He stops, tilts his head. Could be a bird, could be wind scraping bark. But no, there it is again, closer this time. Elijah turns off the trail and begins to follow. Every few feet he stops and listens. The sound grows sharper, more desperate. It's not a cry of aggression, it's a cry for help. His pulse quickens, not from fear but recognition. He's heard animals call like that before. Once from a trapped fox, once from a deer whose fawn had fallen through thin ice. When he finds the source, everything inside him stills. At the base of a cedar tree, half buried in snow, lies a full-grown bobcat, female, beautiful even in death. Her coat is thick and dappled, but stiff now. Icy lashes frame sightless eyes, her front paws clamped in the jaws of an illegal steel snare, rusted and cruel, and tucked against her belly, so still it might be mistaken for a pine cone, is a kitten. Tiny, drenched in meltwater, its ribs rise and fall with terrifying irregularity. Elijah drops to one knee, snow soaking through his pants. He doesn't touch them yet, just watches. The kitten lets out one more trembling cry before collapsing back into the crook of its mother's foreleg. It can't be more than 3 weeks old. This is the kind of moment that splits time. Elijah's breath clouds in front of him. Somewhere deep in the woods, a raven croaks. Snow drifts quietly onto the bodies below. He knows the rules, always has. Don't interfere. Don't imprint. Call fish and game. Let professionals handle wild rescues, but the nearest ranger station is 4 hours south, and there's a storm coming in from the west, the kind that eats roads and buries cars before you can blink. The mother is beyond saving, but the kitten, not yet. Elijah pulls off one glove and reaches into his coat. He peels back the layers until he finds the inside pocket, warm from body heat. Then gently, he lifts the kitten. It weighs less than a pound. Its spotted coat is clumped with snow. Its eyes, barely open, are the blue-gray of morning fog, and its body is cold. "Okay," Elijah whispers. "Okay, I've got you." He tucks the kitten close, zips the parka high, and begins the long walk back. Each step is deliberate, measured. He avoids slipping not out of self-preservation, but for the creature against his chest. The wind begins to rise, snow starts falling in earnest, but Elijah doesn't hurry. He knows better than to run when the forest watches. It takes nearly an hour to return to the cabin, a squat structure built from weathered logs and stubborn will. Perched beside the river, it creaks in the wind but holds steady. Elijah built it himself after the divorce, after the city, the courtrooms, and the things he no longer speaks of. Inside, it smells of firewood and dried herbs. He stokes the flames higher and lays the kitten near the stove on a bed of flannel shirts. He rubs its limbs gently, watching for signs of frostbite. He Googles orphaned bobcat care on his battered tablet using patchy satellite internet. There's not much to go on. Formulas are imprecise, feeding schedules vague. The consensus, don't try this at home. But Elijah isn't trying. He's already committed. That night, the wind howls against the windows like a creature locked out. Inside, Elijah doses warm formula into a tiny syringe, pressing it gently between the kitten's teeth. It swallows, then jerks, startled by the sensation, still alive, still fighting. He sets his alarm for every 3 hours, changes bedding, measures temperature. At 3:17 a.m., the kitten opens its eyes fully and looks at him, not past him, not through him, at him. For one quiet moment, Elijah forgets everything else, the rules, the consequences, the storm beyond the glass. "You're staying," he says softly. The kitten blinks, slow and solemn. He names him Koda the next morning, after the Salish word for friend. And though he doesn't know it yet, Elijah has already broken every rule in the book, not out of rebellion, out of something much harder to define. Hope. 1 pound of wild hope. The first morning after the rescue, Elijah wakes to silence. Not the peaceful kind, but the heavy, uncertain kind. The kind that wraps itself around your ribs and makes you afraid to breathe too loudly. Outside, snow stacks itself against the windowsill, erasing edges, softening the world. But inside the cabin, life is still precarious. Koda lies curled in a wool-lined box near the fire. His eyes are closed, breath shallow, sides fluttering like paper in wind. Elijah watches him from the table, fingers wrapped around a mug gone cold. He doesn't know if the kitten will live through the day. Elijah has seen animals die. He's buried dogs, lost fledglings, found deer tangled in barbed wire, and fox kits starved in spring drought. But something about this kitten, this trembling, barely alive flame, unsettles him in ways he can't name. He checks his notes again, the list of feeding times, dosage, temperature goals, the scraps of internet wisdom and vet advice scribbled hastily the night before. It's not enough. None of it feels like enough. Still, when Koda lets out a hoarse little chirp just before noon, Elijah feels something unlock in his chest. It's the sound of refusal, of defiance, of life. He warms the formula, tests the tip of the syringe on his wrist, and lifts Koda gently into the crook of his arm. The kitten is impossibly light, 1 pound of fur and bones and instinct. But his mouth opens, and he latches onto the plastic with surprising urgency. Elijah feeds him in slow, careful pulses, and with each swallow, something fragile steadies between them. Koda sleeps for hours after that, tucked into Elijah's flannel shirt like a secret. His breathing is stronger now, his body warmer, but Elijah doesn't move from the armchair. He sits with the weight of a single heartbeat against his chest and thinks, "We made it one more day." That night, he dreams of snow falling in reverse, melting back into clouds, of a kitten leaping from branch to branch, spots glowing like stars in twilight. Koda dreams too. Paws twitch, whiskers flick. The fire cracks once, and both man and Bobcat stir but do not wake. Over the next few days, their lives fall into a quiet, demanding rhythm. Elijah sets his alarm for every 4 hours. At 2 a.m., he shuffles barefoot to the hearth, bleary-eyed, formula in hand. At 6 a.m., he checks Koda's weight on an old fishing scale, cheering quietly when the numbers tick upward. His fridge is now 80% kitten formula, goat milk, raw chicken, and powdered taurine supplements. His inbox? Ignored. His phone? Silent. Nothing else matters. By the end of the week, Koda opens his eyes more often. They are slate gray now, flecked with gold, and always watching. He begins to respond to Elijah's voice, turning his head when he hears it. His ears, triangular and oversized, twitch toward any sound: the snap of a log, the clink of a spoon, the sigh Elijah lets out when he realizes he's burnt the eggs again. And with health comes mischief. Koda learns to climb, first Elijah's boots, then the couch, then the kitchen table, which he promptly uses as a launch pad to reach the windowsill. Elijah installs a soft barrier, hoping to keep the kitten away from the cold glass. The next morning, he finds Koda asleep behind the toaster, smug and warm. Every surface becomes a jungle, every object a toy. Elijah's cabin, once so orderly, now looks like a storm has danced through it in tiny paws. Still, Elijah laughs more than he has in months. Dr. Calvert visits again on day 10. She stands in the doorway, her winter coat still dusted with snow, and stares at the kitten curled around Elijah's wrist like a living bracelet. "I take it he's still alive," she says dryly. "Thoroughly." She steps inside, kneels near the hearth, and begins her exam. Koda tolerates her touch with only one warning growl and a paw swat that doesn't quite land. Teeth are coming in. Weight's good. Coat's healthy. Elijah watches her, waiting for the but. It comes, of course. "You realize you've crossed the line," she says quietly. "He's bonded to you, and you to him." Elijah doesn't deny it. "He sleeps on your chest, follows your scent, watches your face like a cub watches its mother. You're not just a caretaker now. You're part of his imprint." "What would you have done?" Elijah asks. She sighs. "Probably the same, and I'd regret it just as much." There's no judgment in her voice, only realism. "I'm going to report this," she adds. "You're technically within your rights under state law for now, but that won't last forever. Eventually, someone will ask what your long-term plan is." "I know." "Do you?" Elijah doesn't answer. She writes notes in a small book, then pauses. "You gave him a name?" "Koda." She raises an eyebrow. "Means friend." For a long time, she says nothing. Then she nods once and leaves the medicine on the table. The following week, Elijah starts building the outdoor enclosure. It begins with a sketch: 2,000 square feet of chain link and wooden beams, a tall perch for climbing, a shallow pool fed by a hose, and wind shelters built from reclaimed barnwood. Neighbors drive by and stare. One of them, an old logger named Bill, stops his truck and leans out the window. "You building a zoo?" he asks, half amused, half annoyed. "Something like that," Elijah says, hammering in a post. Bill just shakes his head and drives on. Koda watches all of it from the porch, his tail flicking with interest. Every day, Elijah works until sunset. Every night, Koda greets him at the door like a shadow with eyes. The bond deepens in small, unspoken ways. When Elijah limps in after twisting his ankle, Koda curls up on his foot until the pain fades. When thunder rolls across the mountains, Koda hides in Elijah's hoodie until the storm passes. And once, when Elijah falls asleep with the door cracked open. He wakes to find Koda asleep on his chest again. Claws sheathed, breath slow, a soft whimper rising from deep inside. Wild cats don't whimper, Elijah tells himself. But maybe this one does. Maybe this one is still deciding what it means to survive. And maybe, just maybe, he's teaching Elijah the same thing. The pact beneath the quilt. Snow still clings to the northern slopes of the Bitterroot Mountains, but the days are lengthening. Icicles fall like glass daggers from the cabin's eaves, and the wind carries the scent of something softer. Mud, maybe, or pine needles freshly thawed. Inside, life is anything but still. Koda is no longer a trembling whisper of survival. He is a presence now, small, sure, and tireless. At 5 weeks old, his legs have grown stronger, his fur thicker, and his voice more confident. He chirps and yowls at Elijah with the gusto of a creature convinced the world owes him answers. And Elijah, for reasons even he doesn't fully understand, replies. "Easy," he murmurs, when Koda gets tangled in a pile of laundry. "Hungry again? So soon?" he mutters, standing barefoot at the stove, stirring formula by lamplight. "Back already?" he says as Koda scales the leg of his jeans, claws half-sheathed, eyes bright with anticipation. Every word deepens the thread between them. But words aren't the only thing forming the bond. There's a quilt, old and soft, a patchwork of fading greens and browns that once belonged to Elijah's grandmother. For years, it lay folded at the foot of the bed, untouched. Now it smells faintly of goat's milk and fur and wood smoke. It's where Koda sleeps each night, curled into the hollow beside Elijah's ribs, his tiny heart thudding like the wings of a bird inside a cage. The first time Elijah tried to put him in the enclosure crate overnight, Koda screamed so loudly it shook the windows. When the crying didn't stop after 10 minutes, Elijah relented. He picked the Bobcat up, wrapped him gently in the quilt, and held him against his chest. The kitten stopped crying immediately. That moment became a quiet vow, spoken not in language but in closeness. From then on, they share sleep like it's a campfire in the wilderness. Elijah tries not to think about the implications. He knows enough biology to understand imprinting, knows enough law to know where this could end. He's read the regulations twice and spoken with Dr. Calvert about what minimal human interaction actually means in practice. He is breaking every one of those boundaries. But he also knows something else, something unscientific and inconvenient. If he stops now, Koda will not survive. Not because he won't eat or grow, but because something in him has already chosen Elijah. And somehow, that matters more than the rules. By mid-March, Koda's personality fully reveals itself. He's clever, more than Elijah expects, able to open latches with his teeth, disappear into cracks behind furniture, and leap from the bookshelf to the kitchen counter with terrifying grace. He's also stubborn. He doesn't respond to his name exactly, but he does come when Elijah whistles, sometimes. Other times, he simply tilts his head like a prince being summoned and returns to batting a bottle cap across the floor. Elijah documents everything: feeding logs, weight charts, photos, videos. It started as compliance, a paper trail for permits, but has since become something else. Memory. Evidence that this happened, that this mattered. He sends a few of the videos to Dr. Calvert. One shows Koda curled in Elijah's lap, chewing on the drawstring of his hoodie while making odd, trilling sounds. Another captures Koda chasing a feather tied to a stick like a house cat. The vet doesn't respond right away, but when she does, it's with a single sentence. He thinks you're his world. Elijah doesn't reply. He doesn't need to. One night, as the wind rakes the roof and the fire dwindles to embers, Elijah dreams he's back in the forest. In the dream, he's carrying Koda against his chest, wrapped in the quilt, walking through snow. But when he looks down, it's not a kitten he's holding. It's something larger, wilder, eyes gold as firelight. He wakes to find Koda asleep on his chest, one paw stretched out across his sternum, claws retracted, mouth slightly open. A little line of drool stains Elijah's shirt. The bobcat lets out a soft, unconscious chirp and nuzzles deeper into the warmth. For a moment, Elijah can't move, not because of the weight, but because of the clarity. This is no longer about rescue. It's about relationship. The following morning, he begins modifying the enclosure. He adds a higher platform made from salvaged timber, installs more climbing structures, hangs rope swings and hidden scent caches. Every change is designed to prepare Koda for autonomy. But part of Elijah knows it may never come. There's a moment, one afternoon, when Elijah is hammering planks and looks up to find Koda watching him from the edge of the porch. The young bobcat's head is cocked to one side. His ears, still comically large for his body, swivel independently, catching the sounds of birds, hammer, wind, and then Koda chirps, a short, sharp sound. Elijah chuckles. "What? Want to help?" Koda bounds off the porch and trots over, bold as anything, then climbs up onto the pile of scrap lumber and sits, directly on the blueprint Elijah had been sketching. "You're not making this easier, you know." But secretly, he's glad. Every day brings something new. Koda trying to stalk Elijah's bootlaces, Koda knocking over a bowl of water, then gleefully skating across the puddle, Koda curling around the curve of Elijah's neck while he tries to read. And yet, the wildness never disappears. It pulses beneath every playful lunge, every growl when a stranger approaches the cabin, every instinctive freeze when a hawk passes overhead. Koda is still a bobcat, a predator designed by millennia of survival. But he's also something else now, something that exists in the space between instinct and invitation. Elijah writes in his log one evening, "He's not tame, but he's not wild anymore either. He's with me." And perhaps that's enough. For now, hunger, healing, and the name Koda. The storm presses in like a memory Elijah can't outrun. Outside, snow falls so thick it feels like the sky is unraveling. Inside the cabin, the air is warm but tense. The fire pops. Steam curls from a tin mug. And in the center of it all, swaddled in a makeshift nest of flannel and fleece, lies a bundle no bigger than a mitten. The kitten sleeps fitfully, ribs rising too fast, nose crusted with milk, paws twitching as if fighting dreams. Elijah watches from the armchair, hunched in his thermal layers, one hand on the floor near the bin where the bobcat lies. He hasn't slept since bringing the animal in. Every shallow breath, every cough, every whimper jerks his attention back. He's kept orphaned animals alive before, an injured fawn, a crow with a broken wing. But this is different. Bobcats are not animals you tend. They are wild in the bone. But this one is holding on. By morning, the kitten opens one eye, then both. A low, rattling sound bubbles up from his throat. It's not a growl. It's not a purr either. Just something alive. Elijah lets out a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. "All right then," he whispers. "You're not done yet." Naming him comes later, after a call to the only vet who doesn't hang up when she hears the words "orphaned bobcat." Dr. Maureen Calvert, a large animal veterinarian based in Hamilton, reluctantly agrees to meet him halfway in a weatherproof barn near the main road. Elijah drives the truck in first gear through 6 inches of fresh powder, checking the back seat every 2 minutes where the kitten, tucked in a crate lined with his own wool shirts, sleeps so deeply it scares him. At the barn, the vet is waiting. She's 59, with graying hair tucked beneath a beanie and the no-nonsense posture of someone who's spent decades lifting more than her weight in livestock. She doesn't greet Elijah, just motions toward a hay bale. "Let me see the patient." When she pulls back the fleece and sees the kitten curled like a comma, her expression softens, just slightly. 3, maybe 4 weeks, she mutters. "You realize this is a wild animal, right?" "I do. And that you can't just raise him." "I'm not planning to," Elijah says. But the storm was coming and she waves a hand. "Save it. Let's focus on keeping him alive first." She works quickly. Gentle hands, efficient movements. Checks hydration, body temperature, respiration. Administers subcutaneous fluids and a dose of kitten-safe antibiotics. Then she pulls off her gloves and gives Elijah a long look. "If you're going to do this," she says, "you'll need more than formula and good intentions." That night, Elijah sits at his kitchen table, the wood stained with ring marks and claw scratches from old projects. The vet's instructions are scrawled across half a notebook page. Feeding every 3 hours. Warm bedding. No loud noises. No direct eye contact. The goal is survival, not bonding. But the rules blur by day 3. Because Koda, yes, that's what he names him now, Koda, from the Salish word for friend, refuses to sleep unless curled against Elijah's chest. The bin becomes a nest for feeding breaks, but not for rest. He climbs out using strength that surprises Elijah, mewling until those tiny paws find the rhythm of a heartbeat. By the end of the first week, Elijah's flannel shirts are all pocked with tiny holes. His fingers bear red pinpricks from misdirected teething. He's memorized every variation of Bobcat vocalization and now dreams in chirps and trills. Koda is growing fast. His fur begins to thicken, the reddish-brown blending with small black spots that will one day help him vanish in leaf cover. His tail, already a stubby bob, flicks with growing precision, and his eyes, large, golden, and impossibly expressive, track Elijah with unsettling focus. "Too smart," the vet says during a house call. She watches Koda scramble up Elijah's pant leg like a tree. Too attached. Elijah tries to enforce boundaries, places a heating pad in a crate across the room, tries to let Koda cry it out, but every time the kitten yowls until Elijah gives in. "You're not a mother," he tells himself, but he is something. Every feeding becomes a ritual. Warmed goat milk, a soft cloth to clean Koda's chin, gentle rubs beneath the jaw to mimic grooming. And every time, Koda stares up with half-lidded eyes, as if memorizing Elijah's face. One night, Elijah wakes to find Koda nestled beneath his beard, one paw resting over his lips. Not gripping, just resting, as if to say, "Shh, I'm here." He doesn't move. By the end of the month, Koda is 4 pounds, nimble on his feet, and full of mischief. He discovers how to open the cabinet door beneath the sink. He begins stalking the broom with the seriousness of a mountain lion. He hides behind the couch and pounces when Elijah least expects it, claws out, tail flicking with joy. The cabin, once a quiet refuge, becomes a jungle gym. Neighbors start asking questions. At the general store, Nancy inquires about Elijah's bandaged hands. He mutters something about a feral rescue. She laughs, then stops when he doesn't. Dr. Calvert returns with a wildlife compliance officer in tow. They check the enclosure Elijah is building outside, a wide space lined with chain-link fencing, platforms, and shelters designed to mimic the forest floor. "You're serious about this," she says afterward. "I didn't expect to be," he replies. They say nothing for a moment. Then she glances at the bobcat, now napping on the windowsill like a domesticated prince. "He's not like most wild animals," she says quietly. "But that doesn't mean this will be easy." Elijah nods. In the background, Koda stirs. He stretches, yawns, and pads across the floor toward Elijah, ears twitching, tail up like a question mark. Elijah crouches, lets the bobcat come to him. And when Koda presses his forehead into Elijah's chest, curling there with a sigh, Elijah doesn't think about regulations or outcomes. He only thinks about that sound in the snow. The small, helpless cry that started everything, and the way this one tiny, wild life chose him in return. Claws and couches. Don't mix. By late April, the snow has melted from the valley floor, leaving behind thick patches of mud and the scent of new pine. The river rushes higher now, swollen with meltwater, and birdsong spills into the mornings like a new language. Spring has arrived in the Bitterroot, and with it, the sharp, chaotic energy of growth. Koda is nearly 5 months old, and chaos incarnate. His body has stretched, lengthened, filled out with lean muscle and wiry strength. At 12 pounds, he moves like a shadow with too many sharp corners. His spotted coat has begun to shift from kitten fuzz to the sleek fur of a juvenile predator. His eyes, once round and wide, have narrowed slightly, their golden hue now deep and sharp like molten metal. And he's everywhere, all the time. The cabin, Elijah's carefully kept refuge, has become a war zone. The bookshelf, emptied, the curtains, shredded, the rug, claimed as territory, marked with tiny claw scores and tufts of fur. Koda has decided that everything belongs to him. Elijah's bed, Elijah's boots, Elijah's coffee cup, which he knocks off the table every morning like it's part of the sunrise ritual. His favorite game is Ambush the Human, a pastime that begins with silence and ends with Elijah's ankles bearing fresh scratches. One morning, Elijah wakes to find a mouse carcass in his slipper, a gift, a warning, a reminder. He's not entirely sure. The reality is simple, though. Koda is no longer just cute. He's becoming what he was born to be, an apex ambush hunter, designed for silence, speed, and precision. Elijah watches him stalk a fallen feather across the floor and thinks, this is the real animal now. Still, he laughs, often, even when he shouldn't. Like the time Koda opened the pantry and shredded 3 rolls of toilet paper into confetti, or when he dragged Elijah's camera bag into the corner and chewed through a $400 lens strap, purring the entire time. Elijah documents everything, still. But now, his notes include damage reports, behavioral tracking, and a checklist labeled, "Things I Shouldn't Leave Within Paw Reach." Despite the madness, or maybe because of it, the bond between them deepens. Koda sleeps at the foot of Elijah's bed, a warm, sprawling tangle of limbs and tail. He greets Elijah at the door every evening with trills and headbutts, rubbing against his legs like he's trying to erase the scent of the outside world. He eats from a handcrafted wooden bowl that Elijah carved from a fallen birch branch. And though he refuses to respond to commands, he follows Elijah from room to room like a silent guardian. Sometimes, it's easy to forget what he is, but the reminders always come. Like the day Elijah brings home a rescued squirrel pup, hoping to nurse it back to health. He leaves the box near the fireplace, just for a moment. When he returns, the box is overturned and the squirrel is gone. Koda sits nearby, licking his paws, eyes soft and unreadable. There's no blood, no drama, just instinct. Elijah doesn't say anything, just stands in the doorway for a long time, feeling the weight of what's to come. Later, he writes in his journal, "It's not his fault. It's mine. I keep trying to give him a story that doesn't belong to his species." Dr. Calvert visits again in May. She wears a denim jacket and brings elk meat packed in dry ice. She watches Koda dart between shadows, now large enough to climb to the top of the bookshelves and perch there like a gargoyle. "He's not a baby anymore," she says. "I know. He's not a pet either. I know that too." She folds her arms and gives him the look of someone who has delivered hard truths to a lot of well-meaning people. "You're not going to be able to keep him much longer. Not like this." "I'm building the larger enclosure," Elijah says, nodding toward the back field, where poles and fencing materials lie stacked in the grass. "It'll be ready by the end of the month." "That's not what I meant." He doesn't reply. Instead, he turns to watch Koda as he tears across the room, chases a moth against the window, and then leaps onto the table in one fluid motion. A plate crashes to the floor. Koda freezes, eyes wide, then slowly backs down, tail twitching. He looks up at Elijah. There's no apology in those eyes, but there's no fear either, just connection. Later that week, Elijah begins what he calls the transition. He starts spending more hours outside with Koda. He sets up logs, hides treats, encourages climbing. They spend long afternoons in silence, Elijah on a camp chair, Koda stalking grasshoppers or sunbathing on a rock. He also starts experimenting with distance. He walks to the far edge of the field, waits to see if Koda will follow. Sometimes he does. Sometimes he doesn't. Elijah doesn't force it either way. They're learning each other again. One afternoon, while hammering in fencing posts, Elijah looks up to find Koda crouched behind a bush, eyes locked on him. There's a pause, a heartbeat of stillness, and then Koda pounces. He hits Elijah square in the back, claws half-sheathed, tail flicking like a metronome of chaos. Elijah lets out a yell and collapses into the grass, laughing until tears form. "You menace!" he gasps. "You absolute little tyrant." Koda purrs and begins grooming his beard with rasping licks. That evening, Elijah soaks his arms in ice water, new scratches glowing red against his skin. He looks at himself in the mirror, unshaven, exhausted, covered in minor injuries, and smiling. "This is either the best or dumbest thing I've ever done," he mutters. Koda, watching from the doorway, chirps once, as if in agreement or dissent. Elijah isn't sure, but it doesn't matter. They've passed the point of no return. The hug training begins. By early June, Koda is 30 pounds of unpredictable devotion. Sleek, strong, and spring-loaded, he moves like something coiled from smoke and muscle. His paws are heavy now, his shoulders broadening. No longer kitten nor cub, he's a young predator in the prime of his becoming. And with that growth comes an intensity Elijah never could have prepared for. It starts as a pattern. Every evening, without fail, as Elijah returns from the field, sometimes muddy, sometimes sunburned, always tired, Koda is there, waiting, at the door, at the gate, at the corner of the porch, sometimes crouched, sometimes pacing, but always watching. And then the leap. Koda launches himself like a spotted missile the moment Elijah steps within reach. The first time it happens, Elijah isn't ready. Koda barrels into his chest, claws extended, momentum unchecked. They tumble backward into the grass. Elijah wheezes through the impact, blinking up at the sky as the bobcat sits squarely on his ribs, purring like a storm engine. It would be charming if it weren't mildly life-threatening. The second time, Elijah tries to sidestep, fails. Koda still connects, full force, straight to the sternum. After a week of this ritual, Elijah sports bruises in strange places and a set of puncture marks that make Dr. Calvert wince. "He's showing affection," she says, dabbing antiseptic on his forearm. Problem is, affection in bobcat language usually involves gripping something very tightly. With claws. With claws, she confirms. Their mothers carry them by the scruff. Roughness is instinct. He's not attacking you, he's clinging. Like a very sharp toddler. Exactly. Elijah goes home with gauze on both arms and an idea forming in the back of his mind. 2 days later, he finds it at a yard sale. An old welder's jacket, thick leather, reinforced sleeves, heavy enough to stop sparks, and maybe, just maybe, a bobcat's claws. He brings it home, patches it with leftover padding from a backpacking kit, and pulls it on with a mix of hope and resignation. "Koda," he says, stepping into the yard, arms out, "we're going to learn the art of the gentle greeting." The process begins, as all strange and beautiful things do, with failure. The first few attempts are disasters. Koda doesn't understand the change. He claws anyway, climbs Elijah like a tree. The jacket protects the skin, but not the pride. Elijah stumbles, swears, gets back up, but he doesn't stop. He never pushes Koda away, never scolds him. Instead, he repeats the motion, opens his arms, lets Koda come, takes the impact, then, slowly, guides the pause, reinforces the soft landings, waits for moments of gentleness and marks them with praise. It's not about obedience, it's about recognition. Over weeks, Koda begins to adjust. He lunges slower, lands with more balance, starts wrapping his front legs around Elijah's sides instead of his shoulders, claws retracted just enough to show restraint. By midsummer, the hug has evolved into something unique. It's no longer a tackle, it's a ritual. Koda rises onto his hind legs as Elijah approaches, front paws lifted slightly, head tilted just enough to meet Elijah's gaze. Elijah bends, offers the familiar padded arms, and Koda folds into him. It lasts 3 seconds, then 5, then sometimes longer. Purring, eyes closed, as if listening to Elijah's heartbeat beneath the leather. Elijah keeps track of each moment in a notebook labeled behavioral milestones. But somewhere along the line, the notes become less about training and more like poetry. Today he didn't claw once. He leaned into me like I was a tree, and he was tired of pretending to be tough. I wonder if this is what trust feels like in a language with no words. Neighbors still shake their heads. Bill Morrison, watching from his tractor one evening, mutters, "Looks like a man wearing armor to cuddle a land shark." But others are quietly moved. Nancy from the general store brings her niece to watch from a safe distance. The mailman pretends not to notice, but starts leaving cat treats in the mailbox. One afternoon, a car pulls up to the edge of the property. A woman steps out with a long lens camera. She doesn't speak, just nods toward Elijah and gestures for permission. He shrugs. Why not? She captures the moment just as Koda stands on hind legs and Elijah meets him halfway, arms wide, jacket worn, expression somewhere between joy and surrender. The photo ends up on a local news blog with the headline, "Mountain Man and His Hugging Bobcat. Unlikely Companions Share Evening Ritual." Within days, the story goes viral. The internet has questions. Is it safe? Is it real? Is it legal? Is it love? Elijah tries not to read the comments, but Dr. Calvert does. She brings him a printed copy of the article and says, "They're coming, one way or another. You need to be ready." He nods. But that night, as he stands by the garden gate and sees Koda's shadow rising at the edge of the porch, none of the noise matters. Only the silence between them. Only the pause before contact. Only the soft weight of a paw on padded leather, and the breath of a creature who could vanish into the mountains at any moment, but chooses instead to stay for now. When Law knocks at the cabin door. The morning the officers arrive, the mountains are unusually quiet. Mist clings low to the pines, and the wind has paused, as if nature itself is holding its breath. Elijah hears the crunch of gravel long before he sees the truck. It's unmarked, forest green, and too clean for this road. It parks near the old cedar, engine idling, doors swinging open with slow finality. Two people step out. One is a young woman, early 30s maybe, crisp brown uniform and badge that catches the morning sun. The other is an older man, clipboard in hand, wearing the look of someone who's had to issue warnings more often than he's given permission. Koda senses it too. He watches from the top of the enclosure's climbing platform, tail still, ears pricked forward. His golden eyes track every step like a scope set to high alert. "Mr. Barrett?" the woman calls. Elijah nods, walking down the porch stairs to meet them. "I'm Officer Marianne Yates, Idaho Department of Fish and Game. This is Agent Lowell from Wildlife Compliance." They shake hands, briefly. "We've received reports," she continues, "about a bobcat being kept in proximity to a residence, without adequate fencing, supervision, or intent to rehabilitate and release." Elijah holds her gaze. He's in an enclosure, and I have a temporary wildlife care permit, filed through Dr. Maureen Calvert. "We're aware," Agent Lowell cuts in. But with the recent media attention, he glances at his clipboard, and the video circulating on social media, there's concern about habituation and public safety. "Concern?" Elijah repeats. Officer Yates's tone softens. "We're not here to arrest you. We're here to assess the situation. May we take a look?" Elijah steps aside and gestures toward the enclosure. They walk slowly, noting the perimeter. Tall chain-link fence, double-gated entry, climbing structures, natural foliage. Elijah has spent months refining it, adding scent trails, prey-mimicking toys, perches high enough for Koda to feel safe, and low enough for Elijah to reach him. Koda remains motionless through the inspection. Not hiding, not aggressive, just still. It unnerves them more than if he'd growled. Inside, Elijah produces the permits, the medical logs, photos of the rescue site, veterinary records, and a spreadsheet of Koda's feeding history, weight milestones, and enrichment routines. They review it all in silence. Finally, Officer Yates sets down the papers. "Your documentation is thorough. Your enclosure meets state minimums. But here's where things get complicated." She pauses, looks directly at him. Koda is no longer a temporary rehabilitation case. At his age and current condition, he should be transitioning toward independence. Instead, he's bonded deeply to you. Elijah doesn't argue. That bond, Agent Lowell adds, while clearly mutual, makes him unsuitable for release. But it also disqualifies him from permanent private ownership under current wildlife regulations. So what are you saying? Elijah asks. We're saying, Yates replies, that in 6 months, you need to make a decision. Prepare him for release if that's even possible. Or transfer him to a licensed sanctuary equipped to house and manage a non-releasable carnivore. Elijah's stomach knots. There aren't many of those. We've provided a list, Agent Lowell says, handing over a folder. Start contacting them now. The process can take time. And Koda, he glances toward the enclosure again, is a special case. Special. Elijah nearly laughs. They don't see the full picture, the dawn rituals, the way Koda hums in his throat when Elijah walks by, the way he waits every evening by the gate, always watching, always hoping. But Elijah nods anyway. They leave shortly after. Polite but firm, with the weight of the law trailing behind them like cold fog. That evening, Elijah doesn't go into the enclosure right away. He sits outside instead, staring at the ground, folder unopened in his lap. Inside, Koda watches from the perch, tail flicking slowly. Minutes pass, then paws land softly on dirt. Koda walks down, not with aggression, not with caution, just with presence. He pads to the gate, sits, and waits. Elijah finally rises, slips on the old welder's jacket, and opens the latch. Koda rises up, smooth, practiced, front paws extended, eyes closed. The hug lands quiet and sure, a shared moment of stillness in a world suddenly too loud. That night, Elijah writes just 2 words in his notebook. We begin, and he does. He throws himself into research. He watches videos of wild bobcats hunting, studies scent rewilding techniques, reads case studies about transitional behavior, predator rehab, and what constitutes release readiness. He builds new training devices, hangs frozen meat in the enclosure to mimic hanging prey, constructs a hollow log filled with live crickets, installs motion-activated puzzles that dispense small rewards. Koda plays with all of it, but plays is the right word. He doesn't hunt. He doesn't finish. He pounces, retrieves, and brings the kill back to Elijah like a child bringing a drawing to the fridge. Too domesticated, Elijah mutters, watching the bobcat nose a rabbit pelt into his lap. Too smart, too bonded. Still, he doesn't stop. He contacts every facility on the list. Some never reply. Some offer polite refusals. A few express interest until they hear about the viral video, the hugs, the dependency. No space. Too humanized. Potential liability. Weeks pass, then months. Summer thickens into August. The grass is brown, the river slows. Tourists vanish from the high trails, and the woods go quiet again. Elijah works. Koda watches. Sometimes they play. Sometimes they sit in silence. And every evening, no matter what kind of day it's been, the hug happens. Without fail. The center with room for one more. The phone call comes on a crisp morning in September, just as Elijah is hauling fencing panels toward the rear of the expanded enclosure. His hands are calloused, sleeves rolled, and his breath curls into the air in soft plumes. He nearly misses the ring, his phone buried beneath a coil of rope on the porch steps. He doesn't recognize the number but answers anyway, wiping his palms on his jeans. Elijah Barrett? Speaking. This is Dr. Marcus Hale, director of the Yellowstone Wildlife Education Center in Missoula. Maureen Calvert passed along your name. She said you have a bobcat with a rather unique relationship to humans. Elijah straightens slowly. Yes, he says carefully. His name is Koda. Well, the voice on the line chuckles gently. We've just completed a grant-funded expansion to our ambassador program. We have room for one more. And we're looking for animals who can help bridge the gap between wild and human understanding. Animals with stories that can teach. Elijah doesn't breathe for a moment. Your case is unusual, Dr. Hale continues, but that doesn't mean unwelcome. If you're open to a site visit, we'd love to meet both of you. 2 days later, Elijah loads Koda into a specially modified crate. It's lined with quilted fleece smelling faintly of home. The old welder's jacket is folded neatly beside it. Koda chirps once when the door closes, but doesn't fuss. He knows the truck. He trusts the motion of tires over gravel, the hum of Elijah's voice explaining the route as if Koda understands every word. Missoula is 4 hours east. The road winds through stretches of golden fields, the occasional hawk circling above, the mountains rising like open hands. Elijah glances at the rearview mirror every few miles. Koda sleeps. The Yellowstone Wildlife Education Center sits on a wooded ridge just outside town, its entrance flanked by carved wooden signs and fluttering prayer flags. The air smells of pine and sun-warmed stone. It's quieter than Elijah expects. Peaceful, even with the distant hum of children's voices on a guided tour. Dr. Hale meets them in the parking lot. Late 50s, soft-spoken, thin, wire-framed glasses. His handshake is firm, but his gaze even firmer. "You must be Elijah," he says. He doesn't reach for the crate, doesn't crowd, just gestures toward a shaded bench and says, "Tell me everything." And Elijah does. He talks about the trap in the snow, the broken rules, the sleepless nights, about Koda's first breath of trust, about the chaos of claws and curtains, the armor built from leather and patience, and the ritual that bloomed in their quiet corner of the woods. Dr. Hale listens without interruption. When Elijah finishes, the older man nods once, then stands. "Let's meet him." They carry the crate to a private enclosure, spacious, soft-footed, designed for acclimation. Elijah kneels beside the door, slipping on the jacket with a practiced motion. Then, slowly, he opens the crate. Koda emerges low to the ground, his belly skimming the floor, nose twitching as he maps every scent. He pauses at the threshold, then lifts his head. He sees Elijah, and he stands. Hind legs straight, front paws lifted, head tilted. Elijah opens his arms. The hug happens the way it always does. Silent, sure, complete. Koda leans in, presses his face against Elijah's shoulder, purr rumbling through both of them like a mountain heartbeat. Dr. Hale makes a sound Elijah later realizes is a laugh. "In 30 years, he says, I've never seen anything quite like that." Over the next hour, they walk the grounds. Dr. Hale explains the center's philosophy: education through presence, not performance. The animals here aren't displays. They're survivors. Messengers. Bridges between wild and tame, science and soul. Koda would have his own enclosure, spacious, enriched, designed for climbing, stalking, and privacy. He would participate in demonstrations only with Elijah present. No one would touch him. No one would treat him as a pet. And most importantly, Elijah could remain his primary handler. "We'll even build the hug into his routine," Dr. Hale adds, smiling. "Call it a nightly ritual." Elijah doesn't answer right away. He walks the grounds one more time, thinking. He watches a fox circle a patch of tall grass, watches a bear nudge a puzzle feeder until it clicks, watches children press their hands to glass and whisper, not shout, and he realizes something he hadn't until this very moment. Koda doesn't have to be returned to the wild to remain wild. He just has to be respected. When he nods, it's not reluctant, its release. They move Koda in officially the next week. The first few nights are hard. Koda paces. He yowls. He calls in the strange, haunting way only bobcats can, a sound that vibrates in Elijah's chest and makes his bones ache. Elijah sleeps in his truck again, just like before. But Koda adapts, because wild animals must. By the second week, he's claimed the high platform near the center of his enclosure. He marks it, sharpens his claws, watches visitors with the cool detachment of a prince behind glass. By the third, he begins greeting Elijah again at the gate. Not always with a hug, sometimes with a chirp, sometimes with a look, but always with recognition. And 3 nights a week, as the sun slips behind the ridgeline and the center prepares to close, Elijah steps into Koda's space wearing the same old jacket. The crowd gathers. Children hush. Phones lift. Koda stands. Elijah opens his arms, and they meet in that strange, sacred space between species, not as owner and pet, not even as rescuer and rescued, but as companions, as co-witnesses to something rare, something earned, something wild enough to be real. Sunset hugs and silent crowds. By mid-October, the hug has become a fixture of evening tours. The Yellowstone Wildlife Education Center schedules it like a prayer. Right before twilight, when the light softens and the air stills, and something ancient stirs beneath the pines. Visitors begin to arrive early just to secure a place near the observation rail, bundled in scarves and quiet anticipation. They do not cheer, they do not shout. Instead, they whisper, awed, reverent, because somehow they understand that what they're about to witness is not a performance, but a moment of shared breath between two beings who never should have found each other. Koda doesn't always make them wait. Sometimes, the moment Elijah steps into view, the bobcat rises to his full height on his hind legs, front paws outstretched, tail flicking in controlled excitement. Other times, he lingers on his perch until the very last second, then descends like mist, slow and deliberate, making them earn it. Elijah never rushes. He enters the enclosure calmly, always in the jacket, always with the same slow gait, eyes soft, arms open. Koda closes the space between them with a few fluid strides. Then he stands, and they embrace. For a moment, the enclosure disappears. So do the fences, the audience, the months of training and paperwork and worry. All that exists is the hush of fur against fabric, the low thrum of Koda's purr, and the rise and fall of Elijah's breath as he leans into something larger than either of them. It never lasts long, 15 seconds, maybe 20. But people talk about it like a ceremony. It's like they're made of the same memory, one woman says, holding her child close. I didn't know animals could look at humans that way, murmurs a college student through tears. They're not hugging, an elderly man says quietly. They're remembering. Word spreads. Photos flood social media, some taken respectfully, some not. The local news airs a segment. Then a national magazine picks it up. The bobcat who hugs at sunset. Within weeks, schools across the state are booking field trips just to see him. The donation box overflows. Grants pour in, conservationists visit, documentary crews call. But the center stays careful. Dr. Hale insists on firm boundaries, no touching, no interactions beyond what Koda initiates. Elijah speaks before every demonstration, explaining the behavioral science behind what they're seeing. Bobcats in the wild are solitary, he tells the crowd. They range up to 30 square miles and avoid human contact. This isn't normal, this isn't natural, but it is honest. He goes on to explain the ethics of wildlife education, the importance of maintaining Koda's autonomy, the delicate balance between engagement and exploitation. "And this," he says, gesturing to Koda resting beside him, one paw curled like a sleeping dog, "this is not a trick. This is a relationship built on time, consistency, and an agreement neither of us ever said aloud, but both of us chose to keep. And always, always," he ends with this, "don't try this at home." One evening, after a particularly beautiful sunset paints the sky in lilac and copper, a small girl raises her hand. Her name is Lila. She's 8, and her voice is like wind through dry grass. "Does he love you?" she asks. The crowd goes still. Elijah kneels beside Koda, who looks up lazily, blinking slow with trust. "I don't know," Elijah says after a long moment, "because love is a human word. But I know this. He waits for me. He greets me. He's gentle when he could be wild, and he lets me close when he doesn't have to." He runs a hand gently along Koda's spine. "I think trust is a kind of love, especially when it comes from a creature who owes you nothing." The girl nods once, satisfied. The next day, she sends a drawing to the center, crayon lines depicting a bobcat and a man holding each other beneath a big orange sun. Dr. Hale frames it. Back behind the scenes, life settles into a rhythm. Elijah moves to a small cabin near the edge of the center's grounds. Spartan, clean, just a bed, a desk, and a view of Koda's enclosure through a wide, pine-framed window. He helps with the other animals now too. A blind eagle, a one-legged fox, a trio of raccoons rescued from a burned-out hollow. But Koda remains his constant. He's still wild. He still tears apart cardboard boxes with surgical glee, still yowls when the wind shifts, still eyes visiting ravens with a twitching tail and a hunter's stillness. But he's also something else. When Elijah sits beside the fence at night, Koda often comes to lie beside him, just close enough for their hands to mirror each other, paw and palm aligned on opposite sides of the mesh. Sometimes Elijah speaks aloud, tells him about his old life, about the cabin, about the day they met. Koda listens the way wild things do, not with their ears, but with their presence. Some nights, Elijah dreams of the snow again. Only this time in the dream, he doesn't hear the cry. He walks past. And when he wakes, heart pounding, the first thing he does is pull on the jacket and walk to the gate, just to be sure Koda's still there. He always is. One afternoon, Dr. Hale finds Elijah sitting beneath the observation platform, a sketch pad in his lap. "You've built something rare here," Hale says, watching Koda lounge in a sunbeam. "I didn't build it," Elijah replies. "He just let me be part of it." "You ever regret not releasing him?" Elijah thinks for a long time. "No, because he was never meant to disappear into the trees. Not him. Not with this story." Dr. Hale nods slowly. "There's a difference between taming," he says, "and belonging." And Elijah understands. What he and Koda have is not ownership. It's not dominance. It's a meeting point between instinct and memory, survival and gentleness, solitude and connection. It's not perfect, but it's real. And 3 nights a week, as the sun dips low and the shadows stretch long across the grass, a bobcat stands on his hind legs. A man opens his arms, and for a few brief, sacred seconds, the wild and the human meet in stillness. Not because they must, but because they choose to. The paw on the cheek time passes like water through fingers, quiet, steady, irretrievable. Koda is 7 years old now, And though he moves with the same grace as always, Elijah sees the change. His coat is thicker in winter, richer in tone, but threaded with pale hairs around the face. His gait is just a breath slower. The raw energy of youth has softened into something deeper, more grounded. He's still a bobcat, but now he moves like a creature who knows the weight of what he's carrying. The crowds at the Yellowstone Wildlife Education Center still gather faithfully for the evening ritual. Some are new, first-time visitors drawn by online articles or whispered stories from friends. Others return again and again, standing in the same spot near the platform, mouthing along with Elijah's quiet explanations, camera phones forgotten in their pockets. And Koda? He always appears, no matter the weather, no matter the mood. Rain, snow, wind. He waits by the gate, perched on his favorite stump, ears flicking toward the sound of Elijah's boots on gravel. They hug, still. But the hug is different now. Slower, fuller, as if the space between them has grown not in distance but in understanding. Koda leans longer into Elijah's chest. His paws rest more gently on the leather sleeves. The deep rumble of his purr vibrates like the low hum of the mountain itself. Sometimes, when the hug ends, Koda stays pressed against Elijah for a few extra seconds. Eyes closed, breath slow, as if he's remembering the snow, the warmth, the silence that saved him. One evening in late autumn, the sky turns gold behind the ridgeline. The air is sharp with the scent of pine needles and frost. Elijah enters the enclosure wearing the same old jacket, though it's been repaired 3 times and the lining is frayed. Koda approaches with measured steps. He rises, places his paws on Elijah's shoulders. But this time, he doesn't just hug. He lifts one paw, slowly, gently, and presses it to Elijah's cheek. No claws, just the soft pad of trust. The crowd gasps, not loudly, not disruptively, but in a ripple of shared awe. Elijah doesn't speak. He doesn't need to. His eyes shine with tears that he doesn't wipe away. Koda lowers his paw, leans in, purrs, and the moment lingers like a chord held long after the music has ended. Later that night, after the last guests have gone and the lights dim around the center, Elijah stays in the enclosure longer than usual. Koda lies beside him, stretched out on the warm stone, his tail curled neatly around his body. Elijah runs a hand through the bobcat's fur, slow and rhythmic. "You're getting older, buddy." Koda blinks once, slowly. Elijah continues, voice low. "I don't know how long we have, but I do know this. Whatever time you've given me, you've changed the way I understand what love looks like." The next morning, the center's inbox overflows with emails. Someone filmed the hug and the paw on the cheek. The video travels fast, millions of views in days. A wildlife magazine calls it the most intimate moment ever caught on camera between human and predator. A renowned filmmaker reaches out, requesting permission to include the clip in an upcoming documentary. Elijah agrees, but with one condition. The story must focus on trust, not taming, on patience, not possession, and the film honors that. It premieres 6 months later at the Sundance Film Festival under the title Shared Breath. Koda's story becomes more than viral. It becomes emblematic. Wildlife centers across the country reference it during educational programming. Conservation curricula begin incorporating the case study of Koda and Elijah in their modules on human-animal relationships. Students write essays, scientists publish papers, families make pilgrimages to Missoula just to glimpse the bobcat who hugs. But Elijah, he stays the same. Still quiet, still humble, still showing up 3 nights a week with the patched leather jacket and a voice full of gratitude. He never turns Koda into a mascot, never markets the hug, never forgets the snow. One January evening, as the mountains vanish beneath a thick blanket of clouds, Dr. Hale finds Elijah standing by the observation deck long after the demonstration ends. The bobcat is asleep near the back of the enclosure, his chest rising and falling like waves lapping at a still shore. "He's special," Hale says. Elijah nods. He always was. They stand together in silence for a while. Then Hale speaks again. "You've given him something most wild animals never get. Not just survival, not just safety, but meaning." Elijah doesn't answer right away. He watches as Koda twitches in his sleep, paws flexing gently. Then he says, almost in a whisper, "He gave it back." And he did. Koda taught Elijah the power of presence, of showing up for something without needing to control it. He taught him that gentleness can come with claws and trust with teeth. That healing doesn't always mean returning to who you were, but becoming who you never thought you could be. The bobcat became a symbol, but he never stopped being himself. As winter settles in again, heavier and quieter than the last, Elijah begins writing a book, not a memoir, but a meditation. On patience, on instinct, on the wildness that lives in all of us, waiting for a place soft enough to land. He titles it The Weight of a Paw. The dedication reads simply, "For Koda, who showed me that love doesn't ask to be tamed. It asks to be trusted." And still, each evening, the hug continues, even when no one is watching, even when the cameras are gone and the wind howls and the snow returns to the mountains where it all began. Koda rises. Elijah opens his arms. And between them, in that space forged from snow, leather and memory, something ancient and wordless reaches out once more. A bobcat, a man, a promise kept. The wind moves gently now, threading between the pine needles like a lullaby. The center is quiet. The crowds have gone home. The lights are low, golden, casting long shadows that sway like sleepy animals. Somewhere nearby, an owl calls once, then falls silent. Inside the enclosure, Koda rests on his platform, paws tucked neatly beneath him. His breath rises and falls with the patience of something that no longer needs to prove it belongs. Elijah sits just outside, his hands still in his lap, his heartbeat steady. He doesn't speak, doesn't move. He's simply present, close enough that Koda knows, even in sleep, that he's not alone. This is what healing looks like, he thinks. Not a triumphant charge back into the wild, but the quiet decision to meet each day with softness, to hold space, to trust, and maybe, in a world full of noise, that's the bravest thing of all. The trees whisper above them. The stars begin to appear, one by one, reflected faintly in Koda's half-lidded eyes as they flutter open for a moment. He sees Elijah, sees the night, then closes them again. This is their rhythm now. Stillness, breath, knowing. Tonight, wherever you are, let yourself soften too. Let the world be a little quieter. Let your heart open like the space between arms before a hug. You don't have to tame your wildness to be loved. You just have to stay. Thank you for walking this journey with us. Here at Paw Prints and Stories, we believe the gentlest stories carry the fiercest truths. Stay curious, stay kind, and remember, sometimes the soul you save may just end up saving you back.